Here's a little bit of trivia for you. Did you know that the biggest hit movie for Clint Eastwood was Every Which Way But Loose? And really, it was because of his co-star. Really? Because of his co-star, and guess who that was? Clyde the orangutan. Now, keep in mind, I don't endorse animals being in movies or in any ways being in some domesticated thing. Absolutely not. And today, you're going to learn a lot about these guys and why they should be left alone to live where they are from. In this episode, Leif Cocks joins me. He's the founder and director of the Orangutan Project. And we talk everything orangutan and just why they really are so special. Now, here's a couple things. Did you know that their name comes from the old Malaysian word meaning forest person? And that the orangutan spends most of his time in the trees more than any other great ape. They're also one of the most intelligent primates. They use these variety of sophisticated tools and build complicated nests every night to sleep in. Now, here's another thing I bet you really didn't know. Even with their great big size, they're the most peaceful of all the great apes. Now, these are just a few things we talked about, and wait till you hear Leif's story and all the other crazy things and wonderful things he's doing. So sit back and get ready to enjoy a really, really cool episode. We are supported by PrepVet, providing stem cell therapy for pets.
As a pet lover, did you know your pet can benefit from the incredible healing power of stem cell therapy? Prep Therapy offers a groundbreaking solution taken right from your pet's own blood. Say goodbye to joint pain, arthritis, kidney and liver conditions, and more. They'll experience faster recovery, increased vitality, and extended quality of life without the need for surgery or harmful drugs. Put the wag back in their tail and discover Prep Therapy today at prepvet.com. Save 10% with promo code FURREALPODCAST, covered by most pet insurance.
For real, 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 for real. Got a bunch of furry friends and I love them all the same. I'm an animal lover, veterinarian is the name. Let's share some pet stories from heartwarming to strange, losses and games, from wacky to insane. For real. You're now tuned in to For Real with your host, Mark Kyle.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the For Real podcast. Today, I feel so privileged to have this guy on. First of all, like I was just telling him, I just don't know when he sleeps. He does everything. But Leif Cocks is with me. He is the director and founder of the Orangutan Project, but that's not all he does. And I'm not going to get into it. I'm going to let him get into it. Hey, Leif, thanks so much. You're down in Perth. I know it's really early morning for you, and I just really feel privileged to have you on.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thank you, Mark.
Well, just to get, by the way, you're very welcome. I thank you for having being on. But what I want to do, because, most of the world really, they've seen orangutans. They don't know a lot about them. Can we just start off? One is, let's talk about your background, how you got involved with that. And then let's talk about orangutans so people understand who they are, what they are, and, the ginger guys that we're going to talk about.
Yeah. Well, I got on this journey, over 35 years ago when I started working with 15 orangutans and discovered that not only that they're, magnificent animals, but they're self-aware persons, the same as we are. And they didn't belong in captivity, and they didn't deserve to be driven to extinction in the most horrific ways that we can imagine, be burnt alive and machete to death, which is happening as we speak. And so that started me on my journey to save the orangutan species from extinction, and also to help them as individual persons, as the most intelligent being that shares our planet, and in many ways, a far more noble form of humanity than humans.
Well, more than likely, almost any is, when I've read a lot about primates, especially the great apes, us being one of them, we all share pretty close DNAs, and we probably can learn from them versus them learning from us, the way I feel about people these days.
Yeah, no, there's a couple of great points in that. One is we measure intelligence on our own prejudices. Animals only become intelligent in ways that maximize their survival, because the brain is a large calorie consuming organ, and you don't increase the brain and your intelligence unless it meets your survival needs. Otherwise, it becomes a liability. So orangutans, in their way, are far more intelligent than us. And so they look down at us sometimes and think, well, you're kind of really dumb. You don't have the ability to remember these live temporal spatial maps such as we do. So you must be some sort of ignoramus ape. So we have to be, even among human populations, culturally as well, we have to be very cautious. We're not comparing different types of intelligence and making a judgment call.
Most people don't realize that because we're in the great apes, we're one of them. Maybe they think we're just apes. We're really not the great apes. Maybe that's it.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, we're certainly we're unique and different, but certainly not superior.
So, have you always been interested in primates since you were little? How do you get to? You've written books. We haven't even touched on this everything you've done, but how did you get where you are?
Mm-hmm. Well, as I said, I've always wanted to work with animals, and I just made choices that led on my journey towards that end. And it was like any journey, and I think it's maybe true for a lot of people in their journey. If you really want to do something, you do it.
Right.
But the trouble with most of us is we have so many conflicting desires. Maybe we want a house, we want a family, we want a certain level of comfort, and all these things contradict sometimes. What you need to do to achieve a larger vision for your life, and so I think it's having a single vision and a single purpose for your life allows you to concentrate and magnify your impact in the world.
Well, obviously, you made a big impact. It's funny as my theory is that you go down a path, you never know where it's going to take you, but it always takes you to these pretty amazing things if you actually take that challenge and go down that path.
Yes, and linked to that is the discovery that working selflessly for a higher cause actually makes your life happy and enriched. And so it's a life of selfless sacrifice for a greater cause and for other living beings is not a life of restriction. It's a life of beauty and reward. Although maybe it's not monetary or rewards that we probably normally think of.
Well, you know what you and I are on the same page. My deal is, you don't know this, but I do a lot of refugee work all over the world. And I learned a long time ago, when you give, you get a lot more. And most people don't realize you don't have to wait to get it. If you're giving something, you just get so much more. And that to me is the rewarding part about life.
Yeah, no, exactly. Selfishness leads to unhappiness and misery, and selfless work leads to happiness and fulfillment. And it's a hard lesson for some people to learn because your instant reaction is to aggrandize and protect yourself, physically and mentally and economically.
Yeah.
However, it doesn't really make you as effective as you could be.
Well, exactly. So let's talk a little bit about orangutans because let's educate for everybody listening out there. Let's tell them a little bit about us and a little bit about them and how big they are, who they are. I mean, you know everything, and I've read a lot, but you're the expert. So let's just kind of educate everybody that's listening out there. If you can tell them a little bit, and then let's dig into the Orangutan Project and go from there.
Mm-hmm. Orangutans are one of the great apes, which we are one too, as you mentioned, Mark. And they're the only great ape that lives in Asia, and they all existed all the way in ancient times, all the way up in southern China. But because they adapt to the environment predominantly by culture, not natural selection alone, same as we do, they have long maternal periods. They're born with vacant brains, and they invest heavily into few offspring. And this means they're very prone to extinction.
Let's pause that a little bit. What do you mean by vacant brains? I don't know what that means.
Yeah, cool. So let's say an animal which predominantly adapts to the environment through natural selection, let's say a tiger. A tiger would have lots of offspring over its lifetime, each one genetically a little bit different. And nature selects which offspring are most suited to survive in ever changing environment. Now, to do this, it invests very little into the survival of offspring, but has many. Now, the alternative way of adapting to the environment is to have your brain not hardwired for instinct at birth, but vacant, and is programmed by the mother who programs a culture which is learnt. And this allows the infant over the long maternal period to be programmed by the culture by the mother to better and more uniquely adapt to the environment, which is far more effective than natural selection alone. So we do the same. Our babies are born with vacant brains, very little instinct, and we're culturally programmed to be able to survive in the environment. And orangutans are the same. Now, this is a fantastic system that intelligent animals use to adapt to the environment. However, because you're investing so heavily in so few infants, you're extremely prone to extinction. So if you only kill 1% of the females, or there's really any infant mortality at all, the orangutan population spiral to extinction.
Yeah, and it's funny. I when I was reading about the orangutans, I know they have. It's unusual they can have two babies. Normally, they have one, and in a lifetime, they have one or two or three children max. Right?
That's correct. Yeah, they're very slow reproducing. In fact, they're the slowest reproducing species in the world, and that's linked to intelligence because intelligent animals adapt to the environment for the culture, and they reproduce slowly. For example, there's three species of orangutans, but just give you one example. The Smartton orangutan, on average, has its first baby at 15, and there's 9 years between individual infants.
Wow. And their lifespan is to what, roughly 45 or 60 years or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, we've really only been studying orangutans really within the lifespan. But what we know for the species to survive is that they must live at least into the early 60s in the wild
Mhm.
because of their slow reproduction. And different to humans, of course, they don't go through, the female orangutans don't go through menopause. So they reproduce their entire span of their lifetime.
Wow, that's crazy. So, and this is a thing that I mean, we can get into this more deeper later, but when you talk about because they're critically endangered right now, correct?
That's correct. Yeah,
Yeah.
last category before extinction.
Well, and the sad thing is that the reason that's being happening is generally for the most part from humans, and so like you were saying, so if a mother or a female gets either pushed out or sold for bush meat or whatever they're doing with this thing, you've now lost potentially 3 babies or more if they have a twins, I guess, but for the most part and since you've got such a small group anyways, having to replace it, that takes a long time to catch up to that.
Yeah, no, exactly. So over geological history, the main reason for the reduction of orangutans, which live very spaced out in the environment and slow reproducing, is low levels of hunting from humans, which over the centuries have basically driven them to extinction, except for on two islands, Sumatra and Borneo, where they remain today. Unfortunately, within the last 30 to 20 years, the new threat which is really devastating is the wholesale destruction of their rainforest, and it's been converted for unsustainable monocultures such as pulp paper and palm oil, and that's been the nail in the coffin, taking out most of the orangutan populations. And for example, in Borneo alone, the minimum estimate of number of orangutans murdered is 100,000 in the last 20 years.
Oh, wow, that's crazy. So one of the things, because they're building roads to put that stuff in, and then when they're building the palm oil or the palm trees and doing all that stuff too, what happens is because they make their feeding grounds, which are fruit and leaves for the most part, now they're going into these plants that they've grown, and then the farmers or the ranchers or whatever they call them are actually killing them because they're destroying the crops, and so it's kind of a retribution.
Exactly. Many orangutans are killed in the clearing process, but of course some survive,
Right.
and they're starving. They're starving to death because there's now not enough food in the remaining forest. So then they become an agricultural pest, where they're killed because they threaten the young palm or plants, for example.
Highly intelligent animal called an agricultural pest. What a great term.
Yeah, no,
Horrible.
it's a horrible indictment on humanity.
Oh, it's just it's sad too because they're these kind animals as well. I mean, that's the other thing that bothers me greatly.
Eh, yeah, no, exactly, Mark, and that's just why I referred to them earlier as a more noble form of humanity. Because even though, let's say, the males are at least 3 to 7 times stronger than a human and have teeth the same size as tigers, there's not one recorded case of an orangutan in a zoo, sanctuary, in the wild ever killing a human being, although we've killed hundreds of thousands of them.
Oh, no.
And so, in many ways, we should be looking up to orangutans and their nobility, rather than killing them.
Nobility, that's a really good word. I like that word, nobility. That's a really great word. So a lot of the things that I read. So one is that because of the fires there, that they get really confused in fire, and then they end up burning in the fires because they're not used to seeing fire.
Well, certainly fires is not natural to the Bornean rainforest. So that's a new introduction, which they use to clear the remaining scrub.
Right.
So normally, rainforest doesn't burn, or anyone wants to burn rainforest because it's worth money. So the burnings normally happens in the forest once it's cleared.
Yeah.
They burn the remaining scrub to get the ash and the nutrients into the soil to kickstart the unsustainable monoculture such as palm oil or pulp paper.
So what I really like. So I've actually spent a lot. I've been in Indonesia. I have not been to Sumatra, or I have not been to Borneo, but I've been to Malaysia because they were really in Malaysia at one point. Now they're pretty much just isolated in those two areas. But the name orangutan is a Malay word for person of the forest.
Hmm. That's correct.
I read this really cool thing, and I got to look. I got my notes because I wanted to say it correctly. So originally, though, that name was for for a human people that lived in the forest, and then it kind of translated over to them. Is that right?
Yeah, it's kind of one of those misnomers.
Of
The,
course.
the indigenous people normally call orangutans things like Mawas or Mayas is the indigenous words for orangutan. Although orang means person in Indo-Malay and hutan, which is abbreviated utan, means forest. The actual term orangutan was created by the Dutch as forest person.
Oh, cool. So let's talk about the Orangutan Project. What you're doing, and this how it got started. I know a little bit about the trimates, the three big women in the that you read about a lot, and they're also called something else like a Lakey group or something like that.
Hmm.
So let's talk about how you got started, what you guys are doing, and whatever else, whatever you want to tell me.
Hmm. Well, as I mentioned earlier, that I started working with orangutans, and so on my leave, I would go up to Borneo and Sumatra and learn about them in the wild, rescue orangutans, and then started the Orangutan Project and started developing that up over time until after several years, many years, I built up to the level where I moved full time as my profession,
Mhm.
and then yeah, then worked with a variety of wonderful people and partners to develop numerous projects, both in Borneo and Sumatra.
Well, one of the things I read that I want to give you a pat on the back. You were the first person to integrate an orangutan from a zoo into the wild back again.
Yeah, yeah. So the 15 orangutans I was working with, I uniquely I there was two things which I think was unique. Is one, I kept them in a natural orangutan social system, and so they already knew how to live as orangutans do in the wild. And the second thing is, I had the great opportunity when I started working with orangutans. There was really nothing, no occupational health and safety or anything like that. Or no one actually taught me about orangutans. I knew nothing about them. No one taught me about them. And so I would just go and have my lunch with them and be with them when they had the babies and nurse the babies with the mother and just had a friendship. And it was only later that I discovered that orangutans were considered dangerous and you stayed behind the bars and kept away from them.
Yeah.
And so it then became, as I developed the Orangutan Project in Indonesia, I was then able, before I left the zoo, I was able to bring some of the orangutans back. And so because I could already been with them all their lives and handle them and look after them and all naturally raised and mentally healthy, it then became possible for me to then bring them back with me and release them into the wild, where we were supporting the re-establishment of an extinct population in central Sumatra.
So I have a question for you. I was thinking about we were talking too is, do orangutans have the same issue with like chest congestion or respiratory issues that I know the chimpanzees, it's really difficult for them to survive? Do they have the same thing that chimpanzees have?
No, I mean, because orangutans are not as close as relative as chimpanzees,
Mm-hmm.
they still share 97% of the genetic material with us. And so, except for a few slight variations, you can really consider their medical aspects as the same as human. They catch all the same diseases, etc. The only variation to that is the big males have throat sacs, which they use to create their long call in the rainforest, and they can get something called air sacculitis, an infection there. But that only really occurs with animals which are under stress in captive conditions,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not really something that affects wild animals.
So let's talk about the dominant males because they get what is it, the throat they get the phalanges or whatever they call it. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's called the secondary sexual characteristics. So when the males become mature, and in Borneo that always occurs, and it may never occur in Sumatra. And so they have different strategies of when sexual maturity
Hmm.
occurs.
How old are they when they're sexually mature from that standpoint, typically?
The Bornean orangutans tend to become sexually mature adult males anywhere between 12 and 18 years. In Sumatra, as I said, they may become mature males at 15, but they may never become mature males.
Well, that's pretty common with humans.
Well, in the Sumatran males, the stress from a presence of a dominant male in the area creates high level of cortisol, which reduces testosterone, which stops the other males from becoming fully flanged cheek pad males. And so it's only when the big male starts to wane that the stress levels reduce, the testosterone goes up, and they will change into adult males. So it's a bit of a chess game strategy for them. But just to quickly answer the question is the throat sac is there to create a long call, and you need a large throat sac to have low frequency calls because high frequencies are absorbed by vegetation. Low frequencies travel greatly through the rainforest. So they want to create these long calls to attract females and tell other males to go away. The cheek flanges that you see on the side of the faces, they basically act the same way as the megaphone. They direct the sound in the direction that they want the sound to go. So this is one of the reasons we can demonstrate that they're self-aware persons is they can project themselves into the future. So adult males will call the night before from the night nest in the direction they intend to travel the next day.
Wait a minute, stop that again so I understand what you're saying. The night before,
Mhm.
they'll call what now?
In the direction they intend to move the next day.
Really?
So they'll sit in Yeah, so I sit at night nest and say, I've decided in the morning I am going to move in this direction. So they long call in the direction. They've already decided to move the next day.
And so they're already warning, I guess, the people that they're coming that way or letting the girls know they're coming that way. That's what they're doing that for?
Yeah, I mean, it's both because the big males will fight, you know, um, so it doesn't make sense for them to come across each other unless they're willing to wanting to challenge for a territory. So it just tells the other males, look, unless you want to fight, just I'm going this direction, just move away. And that's a win-win situation, you know, for both. You don't have to deal with that. And also they're super attractive. So they don't go chasing these big adult males. They don't go chasing females. Females chase them. And so they're telling, I'm going this direction. So if you want to come and see me, you know where I am. And so that maximizes the for them to come and and mate, and then he hopefully gets them pregnant over a short consortship.
Well, one of the things I read too is when they fight, that oftentimes their big way to do it, they charge each other, they come back and they break sticks, and they're not really, unless they get really, really aggressive, that's their way. They're going, hey, I'm the big guy, I can break a bigger stick.
Yeah, see that they certainly that the big males are certainly capable and actually do undertake violence, you know, to protect their habitat, but they don't seem to have this want to kill,
Yeah.
you know. So they can get injured and even die from falling or get an injury that may get infected later, but it's not really the main intention. The main intention is to provide enough aggression to deter the other male from challenging your position. They don't seem to have that kill switch, or which I call it, that
Right.
humans and our close relatives chimpanzees have, where they will, you know, chimpanzees, for example, will hunt down another group of chimpanzees, tear their faces and genitals off, and hunt and destroy them, and to the last one, you know, maliciously, you know, attack and kill other chimpanzees, just as humans are capable of doing. Orangutans don't seem to have that capacity. Again, a more noble form of humanity than is expressed in humans.
Well, the chimps are the closest to humans, so that would make a little bit more sense too, I guess, too, right?
Exactly. Chimpanzees are, being our closest relative, have a lot of our characteristics, including things like aggression and warfare, and the ability to look at another person and, in essence, dehumanize them to the extent that you would not value their life.
I'm always sitting back thinking about how wonderful us humans are, and when we really aren't that wonderful. When the more I do this podcast and the more I learn from people like yourself and that, it's always a little bit of embarrassing for me when I think about that we could be better than, we're judging animals, and actually the animals should be judging us.
I think we have to, yeah. I mean, there's an arrogance, I guess, in humanity,
Yeah.
and there's a lot that we can learn from animals, especially our close relatives such as the orangutans, but also from the cultures of indigenous communities, which um, there's no perfection in the world, but sometimes there's better ways of interacting with ourselves and the environment that we can learn from.
Absolutely. So tell me everything that the Orangutan Project. I know you're working with a bunch of people, but let's just talk about, down on the ground, some of the things you're doing to help protect these guys and hopefully take them out of critical endangerment and all that. What all are you guys doing?
The main game is to protect and create 8 ecosystems of the right type, shape, and size of rainforest. So you just can't save any bit of rainforest, because if it's too small, the rainforest ecosystem will collapse over time. For example, a lot of scientists believe the Amazon's already collapsing back to a savanna because there's not enough Amazon to support the Amazon.
Sure.
And so we have to support large ecosystems and large, and what I mean by shape is thin ecosystems don't are not sustainable either, because you have the edge effects. You have about 80% less biodiversity 1 kilometer from edge of rainforest, and more less humidity, more heat, etc. And so you have to have these large, complete ecosystems. And what I mean type of ecosystem is all the orangutans, elephants, and tigers, and the indigenous communities can only survive if the lowland and riverine forests remain, because that's where all the nutrients and biodiversity is. So just preserving the hills and the mountains, which governments tend to want to preserve because it's not really suitable for agriculture and it helps for water catchment, is not going to allow even those rainforests to survive, and certainly will not allow indigenous communities, orangutans, elephants, and tigers to survive. So we have to intelligently develop and put together these ecosystems. And we're doing those in 8 areas now to have sustainable populations of orangutans in each of these ecosystems to survive, and then working with the indigenous communities to develop sustainable agricultural systems under rainforest canopy. So we leave them not only environmentally sustainable, but economically sustainable into the future.
So you basically you're working with humans to kind of blend both of you guys together, right? Is that what you're saying?
Because the Indonesian rainforest is never been empty as such.
Sure.
It's always had people in it. But just like the orangutans, the indigenous communities' rights over that land is not recognized. The big multinational just bulldoze down the forest and say, well, there was no one here. Of course, and just ignore the indigenous people left on the side of the road. And I have a firm belief that we're all interlinked. And if we're going to do any lasting good, it has to be holistic and include all living beings in our circle of compassion. And that includes the indigenous communities that we work with to educate and feed them. And as I mentioned, develop agricultural systems to allow them not only to survive, but actually become affluent in these environments.
I'm glad you used the term holistic because that's on your website, and I wanted to address that because it's just integration at the end of the day, right? Is what you really mean by holistic. Everybody working together to be beneficial for all, correct?
Exactly. So any action which is good for a subset of living beings ultimately is doomed for failure because we're all interconnected.
Yeah, I love that approach.
And so, if you want a short-term win, sure, you just ignore a part of the living beings on the planet or in an ecosystem. But if you really want lasting good, you include all living beings into your circle of compassion. And that gives efficacy to long-lasting solutions. And that can be applied anywhere in the world or globally.
Actually, it can be applied in anything. Long-term solutions actually are long-term solutions. Short-term solutions are, getting something for a short period of time and then not benefiting down the road. It makes sense.
Exactly. Win-lose situations are great for your ego and short-term solutions, but win-win solutions are the ones which are going to have longevity and create the best effect for everybody.
Well, one thing I want to ask you too, because I know, again, this is from my reading, and you know way more than I do, but the orangutans are more in the trees than any of the other primates, for the one thing, and they build their own sleeping nests. They're build big tool builders like most of the primates are, anyways. But do they, because they're eating fruit and things like that? For the ecosystem, are they also spreading seeds in other areas and helping plant, which brings in obviously the plants for one, and then other animals too? Are they doing the same thing like some of the other primates?
Yeah, yes, it's all interconnected. So orangutans are seed dispersers
Right.
for many animals. They're also reasonably, in it, they move branches and they construct nests, and branches get ripped off, and then that creates patches of sunlight on the ground, which allows some grass to occur, which increases the deer population,
Oh,
which then allows for larger populations of tigers, as an example. So it's all interconnected, as it were. And I think as many examples is if you take a a major megafauna animal such as orangutans, there's this cascade effect of change, which will ultimately lead to lower biodiversity.
Right.
And in the broader picture, the scientists are demonstrating more and more that as you reduce the biodiversity of a forest, you greatly reduce its ability to store carbon.
Wow, that's interesting.
And do one of the major things that we're doing to contribute to the planet is to conserve rainforest as the most cost-effective way of mitigating climate change.
Well, we had the same thing here in the U.S. with the wolves, right? Because
Mm.
we got rid of the wolves, and it's a great study is in Yellowstone, and the entire environment started breaking down.
Mm-hmm.
And then they've reintroduced them, and the environment's coming back. I mean, we're not talking about just on the land. When the wolves were gone, it was also affecting the fish life
Mm-hmm.
because they started getting regular animals were going there destroying the streams and that. So it's the same idea. I mean, it's the same idea, different story, but the same story, different book.
It is exactly, and nature knows best.
Yeah.
And when we try to arrogantly believe that we have a better way, it's always been shown that we may have short term success, but ultimately the systems that we create collapse over time.
Well, I mean, you and I are on the same page. And again, I'm blessed from the standpoint of actually being able to do the podcast and talk to people like yourself. And my mind thinks so differently than it did several months ago by talking to people like you. But let's talk about some of the other things you're doing because I don't even know if I can remember everything you're doing. I don't even know how you ever rest. But I know you talk about the elephants, the tigers, and
Mm.
everything else that you're doing. So, and I know you're trying to do a holistic approach and probably blending it all together, but talk a little bit about that. I know you're doing the rainforest saving. I mean, I can't remember it all. So why don't you just talk about everything? And you write books. So, I mean, I don't know when do you stop?
So what I'll do is see, as I was, like highlighting, compassion and love has to be universal. Even though you may be undertaking a specific action, your vision must be universal for the efficacy of the action to take hold. And so the idea was always with the Orangutan Project, it was going to be the umbrella species for all the other conservation efforts. And so, for example, if you protect enough rainforest and habitat, say orangutans, then you don't have to start a squirrel project or a lizard project. They come along for a free ride under that conservation umbrella.
Hmm.
But what we discovered as we're developing these ecosystems, there were 3 species falling outside the umbrella. Elephants were living in fragmented habitat and had human-elephant conflict and being poached for their tusks. So we started an international elephant project to bring them under the umbrella. Tigers had criminal syndicates, same people running drugs and guns and people smuggling were coming in to take out last remaining tigers for the Chinese medicine trade. So we started an international tiger project to deal with those issues and bring them under the umbrella. And lastly, we discovered the indigenous communities in the areas they're working, the children were malnourished and uneducated, and their rights and their future has been taken away by the multinationals, as the vast majority of ancestral land has now been stolen away from them. So we started Forest for People to bring them under the umbrella of our concern and compassion and love. And so that's why we have 4 projects now, is to ensure that we bring all living species along under the umbrella of our conservation efforts.
So, because you're the head of, I think, the elephant, tiger, and what's the other one? I mean,
Forest for People.
I mean, you're doing all that as well along with that? Or I know you have people that are underneath you, but you're directing it because you're the head of all those, correct?
Yes, I'm ahead of all those, and we have so it's a whole ecosystem. So we have chapters all around the world, charities all around the world,
Mm-hmm.
in New Zealand, Australia, Canada, the European Union, US. And I sit on those boards, and we raise funds and connect with people, and then to put those funds into to meaningful change, again, we have a whole ecosystem. So I have Carly, my project manager, Alex is my elephant manager, Hardy's my orangutan manager, and then we have a whole lot of wonderful people and partners, and we have foundations and companies that we're creating to leasing and purchasing land. And so then there's a whole ecosystem of people and organizations that we to effect that meaningful change in the most effective way possible. So yeah, it's a complex ecosystem, both in raising the funds we need to do our work and implementing that action. And so, yeah, I sit in the middle of that ecosystem. I'm surrounded by wonderful people and wonderful organizations.
Well, any people that are working well to help, every project you're doing, they're always the kind of people you want to hang out with, anyways. So, do you get much government funding, or is it pretty much you guys are out there working hard to get kind-hearted people to support you? Both, I'm sure both.
Yeah, the vast majority of our money comes from donors. Private donors giving us funds. Yeah, the as you're in the US, the notable exception that is US Fish and Wildlife
Really?
are one of our major supporters for the elephant work we're doing. Yeah,
Wow, that's crazy.
yeah, they've been a wonderful long-term supporter for our elephant conservation work and supporting. I mean, one of as well as obviously habitat protection, herd protection, translocating of bull elephants and all that stuff we're doing. We get involved with cool stuff like developing the bioacoustic monitoring, so we can monitor elephants as their individual calls within the rainforest ecosystem to better protect them, understand them. And of course, in the future, we hope this will eventually develop that we can actually understand that language, because we know that they're actually communicating to each other over kilometers using subsonic calls below human hearing capacity. And so not only while we're on this journey to, let's say, for example, protect the elephants better through this development of science, which we're helping lead a consortium of wonderful experts, is eventually we might actually learn how they actually talk to each other, which would be ultra cool.
Well, and I know that the big thing right now is AI. There was just a big article about AI being able to talk to the whales. So, are you guys doing something with AI right now?
Exactly that, and AI is a big part of that. So, what you do is, because if it's like let's say a gibbon just does the same call every day,
Mm-hmm.
and it's genetically determined. So you can basically get the reading from that gibbon, and you always know it's that gibbon because it has the same sound signature. But because elephants are actually talking to each other, they're not just doing a call as such.
Right.
Then what you need to do is you have to train the AI and say, look, here's a range of conversations this elephant is giving to other elephants, to different elephants in different situations. Use AI to determine, no matter what the elephant's saying, you can determine if that particular elephant. Now, I don't know if you have it in America, but in Australia, they have, when you go to your bank now and you ring them up, they identify you from your talking.
Well, no, they don't do that here yet. You're kidding me. We're the U.S. We say we're the best ever, but clearly we're not. That's wild.
So they do that. Yeah, you ring up the bank and say, yes, okay, we're identified from your speech pattern that you're Leif, and please go on. And so we're doing the same thing with elephants. We're using the AI to train the AI to determine, with all the different talks and different speaking an elephant does, to determine which elephant is actually talking at the time. And then using triangulation, we can actually determine their exact location.
And then you can start translating at some point. That's wild.
Yeah, that would be the cool thing we could do in the future. I mean, obviously the priority is to save them and to protect them, but it'd be wonderful one day to get to the stage, that we can focus more of our efforts, not just having to save them and the habitat, but actually to learn more about these wonderful beings that share our planet.
Well, I think we're in this stage right now. Science is one of those deals that if you think about it climbs really fast. It kind of plateaus off and grows a little bit, and then it starts going back up on a higher scale. I think right now in science, we're going at a scale that's unbelievable with mRNA technology,
Hmm.
AI. You know, there's some scary part to AI, but the potential of AI
Mm.
is phenomenal. I'm actually talking to, are you familiar with the Dolphin Communication Project at all?
No, no, but I wouldn't be surprised. It sounds interesting.
Oh yeah, they're looking at all the different ways dolphins speak, and they're going to be in an episode. But I have not talked to them about AI. I'm really curious if they're doing that because they communicate not only with sound but with gestures and a bunch of other stuff too, which is going to be a pretty interesting thing. Okay, I know you're down there, and I'm taking all kinds of your time. First of all, Leif, I really appreciate it. Now, I don't know if you have one, but I know I forewarned you that I
Hmm.
do this silly thing where I tell an animal joke at the end of every episode. Do you have one, or do you want me to tell you one?
Oh, I can tell you the world's worst orangutan joke.
Oh, that's the worst jokes are the best jokes for this. Everybody cringes every time. They're going, "Oh, here he goes
All
again."
right,
They're perfect.
be prepared to cringe.
Oh no, no, that's perfect.
What do you call an orangutan with a hand grenade?
No, what do you call one?
A boomerang.
Oh, I love that one. That's perfect for this show. Trust me. Everybody out there that listens is going to say, finally, there's one that's better than the ones Mark tells all the time. That's awesome. I love it. Perfect. Anyways, so let me just add one thing out there for you guys listening. Obviously, Leaf had a better one than I normally have, but if you've got a good one, please send in your jokes. You can have your kids do it, whatever. We always are looking for new jokes. Obviously, we're in a need for them constantly. But if you can send them to me, it's mkyle, Kyle, at thefurrealpodcast.com. And if you've got a great idea of like a great guest like Leif was this now, I'd really appreciate that too. Send that in. But more importantly, Leif, thanks so much for taking the time. We didn't even get into all your books. Oh, you know what? Before we go, tell everybody how to get a hold of you, how they can donate, and all that stuff too. Social media and all that. Let's get that out there before I let you go.
Yeah, you can go to theorangutanproject.org and sponsor for us, adopt an orangutan, or give a donation to make meaningful change in the world, and so that's a wonderful thing. If you go to Leif Cocks, or one word, leifcocks.org, you can see my books that I write. Finding Out Humanity, Orangutans, My Cousins, My Friends, and the peer review articles I write, and then connection to all our different social media to keep in touch the work that we're doing with wonderful partners.
Well, I know some of your books have been really high rated on Amazon and that. So you guys, please go look out leafcox.org or .com.
Leaf.org. Yeah.
.org, and then orangutan.org. And if you go to social media on Instagram and all the typical ones, I follow them. They're awesome. And you're just doing such a great job. And again, I just wanted to thank you for taking the time. I really appreciate it. For me, I can walk around and tell people I know a little bit more than I did when I started today. And really, I really appreciate it for taking the time. I really do.
Yes, thank you, Mark. And just, yes, it's theorangutanproject.org. And would love to get everyone involved. And also just let you know, I will be in America in July, fundraising
Where are you going to be?
with our wonderful. I'll be in Boston, New York, Washington, D.C., Seattle, San Francisco, and Los Angeles.
Well, maybe somehow I'll be able to get to go to one of those and we can meet in person. That would be great.
Oh, that'd be wonderful. I did actually have ambitions to go to Austin, Texas, because we do have a lot of supporters in Austin, Texas.
Oh,
But unfortunately, with the time, it got dropped off the list. But I love to come there one day as well, but not in the near future.
well, and I have a ton of friends in town here that do a lot of uh, similar work in Kenya, and it's a lot of African people that do a lot in Kenya, Roatan, and a bunch of stuff too.
Mhm.
And so let me just finish real quick. Everybody else out there listening, Obviously, we love you guys listening. Please pass it on. This story is a great story to get out there. We can always use more followers, and you do that too. But more importantly, for you guys that have been supporting us, I love you all. Thank you so much. For real. Have a good one, everybody.
For real, 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 for real.
We're supported by Let's Walk, that's here to love your animals like our own.
Austin, Houston, and Denver. Let's Walk is here to love your animals like our own. From daily walks, play, in-house sleepovers, and more. Go to work, out on the town, or take a vacation knowing your pets are in the best hands. This woman-owned small business does it all. Check us out on Instagram at Let's Walk Austin, Houston, and Denver.
That concludes this episode of For Real with your host, Mark Kyle. For previous and future episodes of For Real, listen via all major podcast streaming sites.